Hey everyone, welcome to Tales and Texts, and I'm your host Nisha. I hope you're having a fabulous day and welcome to this episode. So, today's video is going to be really special because fans of the Mahabharata, guess what? I have finished volume 1. Eee! So, if you have been following my Read the Mahabharata video series, that is the readathon playlist, then you know that I am tackling the critical edition of the Mahabharata, which consists of 10 volumes of word for word translations of the Sanskrit BORI Mahabharata edition into English. And if you want to know more about what the BORI edition of the Mahabharata is and what the critical edition is and what this entire readathon series entails, I will link the very first video of this playlist in the description box and the entire playlist in the end cards at the end of the video. So do go check it out. But for those of you who have been following my progress in this particular series, welcome, and I'm sure you'll be as happy to know that I've completed volume 1 as I am happy to have finished it. This video is going to be just an impromptu discussion of the volume 1. And if you have followed my other videos, you know how I love to have conversations about things that happen in the Mahabharata, about discussions that you see in the Mahabharata, about the scenes that take place between people, about the social circumstances and cultural nuances at the time of the Mahabharata, especially in relation to how they affect today, how they have affected the development of India over the years. So I discuss a lot of these things during the course of my playlist, and so far I've done about 4 such videos in this playlist that you can find. Like I said, I'll link the playlist to this end card. And although I have finished the first volume in the series, I do plan to come back to a lot of the themes that are discussed in the first volume and create content about that. I will be ramping up my content creation for the volume 1, because now that I head into volume 2 of the Mahabharata, definitely there will be a lot of things that I'd want to discuss from that volume as well. So I will definitely be ramping up my content creation for volume 1 in the coming weeks, and you can expect to see more videos from me in the next couple of weeks pertaining to volume 1 of this series. Today's video is just going to be a general review of the first volume of the Mahabharata and what it entailed. This book, volume 1, was really interesting. It was very informative, and as you can see, the many tabs over here, the many colorful tabs. I have made a lot of tabs for really important information that I could glean from here. Of course, the first set of tabs in the first couple of pages are the introduction themselves, and the introduction has a lot of information about the historical relevance of the Mahabharata, and Dr. Debroy also goes into the authenticity of the Mahabharata. Now, we do come to know in the introduction, as I've discussed this in the very first video of the readathon as well, that we can see a very authentic and real genealogical lineage of the Pandavas in Indian history. And we see, as we trace back through those kings, we see a lot of the kings mentioned, or rather a lot of the kings in Indian history mentioned over here as well, as the descendants of the Pandavas. Additionally, a lot of the places that we read in the Mahabharata are very real places that are present and thriving in current day India as well. So Dr. Debroy discusses a lot of this, the realistic aspect of the Mahabharata, and tries to strip down all the other additional narratives that have been constructed by people across millennia, as our literary prowess and our language evolved. So a lot of those stories, so I mean, obviously, when we read the epics, we see that a lot of these characters use all these magical astras, they cast these spells, and they converse with the gods, and the gods come down in human form to meet them. A lot of sages can transform into animals, people can change forms, they can become somebody else and impersonate someone through magic. So we see a lot of these things that are obviously not possible in reality, but the crux and the core story of the Mahabharata has been distilled by a lot of anthropologists, historians, Indologists, and just experts in history and the literary disciplines. And in the introduction of the first volume, we do get a sense of what theories are there in terms of what is the real Mahabharata, or what could have been the real story, and what is the other creative addition, the creative liberties that have been taken over the span of many thousands of years as people became more aware of the Mahabharata, and people learned how to write, and more narratives were added. This book was quite a revelation in many aspects, because some of the most major scenes in the first part of the Mahabharata, in the initial sections, were quite different from what I had learned growing up. One of the most I think important scenes in the Mahabharata, which is very widely praised, which is very widely discussed. In fact, it is very widely debated, not just because of the literary creativity and just the word magic that is there in that section, but it's also debated a lot because it brings into question issues such as casteism and classism very prominently. In popular narratives, we see when Draupadi's Swayamvara is going on, Karna wants to participate in the Swayamvara, but he is stopped by Draupadi, and he's questioned about his lineage, because a woman has to cut herself from her father's lineage and attach herself to her husband's lineage. So this is a part that is very widely and hotly debated in literary circles and in circles which enjoy discussing the epics. And I was very eagerly looking forward to reading that section, to see what that section was like and how it was depicted, when the biggest shocker came to me. Now, this is a spoiler, and don't hate me for this, but I have to reveal the spoiler right now. It's that such a scene does not even take place in the critical edition of the Mahabharata. That's right, such a scene does not even exist in the critical edition of the Mahabharata. And so that came as such a huge shock to me, and that really made me reevaluate a lot of how casteism and classism has evolved over the years. Especially because if you do see tons of casteism and classism, you do see racism, you do see, I mean, racism not to so much of an extent, because Krishna, that is God Krishna, is called Krishna because he's dark. Vyasa, his name is Krishna because he's dark skinned. Draupadi is given the name Krishna when she's born because she's dark skinned. So racism to an extent, it does not really exist, so I take that back. But you do see casteism and classism, and a lot of sexism does exist in the Mahabharata. But as you read through the first volume, you see how different sections of the book read differently. And you will only know this if you actually read the text. And once again, I have provided links to the critical edition of the text and other versions of the Mahabharata in the very first video of the series. So please do check it out. It's in the description box. Some of the links are free, so you can go directly download this material for free and start reading immediately. So you see certain sections in the book where the tone is devoid of all this casteism, classism, and sexism, and it seems very gender neutral. It seems directed towards everyone. It seems that the meaning of the message is something that is neutral. It is intended to be consumed by everybody who is hearing it. But then in the very next page, you see this sudden shift where we experience a lot of casteism and classism and sexism, not necessarily together, but we do see these examples of those, which make you wonder, how did this change in tone come into place within just a single page or within just a few paragraphs? And to me, after reading the introduction, especially where you find out how long the tradition of the Mahabharata might have been, and of course a lot of historians and anthropologists are still conducting research to understand the heritage of ancient India. So, of course, these epics, not just the Mahabharata but even the Ramayana, could date back way further than what we think they date back to. So, you can see that, obviously there would have been additions to the storyline. Now, if you have seen my analysis of the critical edition of the Ramayana, which I had done on my older channel called South Asian Mystic, I will link that video down below as well. I spoke of how there are certain narratives in the critical edition of the Ramayana that in the introduction, Bibek Debroy explains, that these were the accepted notions at that time, and so therefore they were valid. But over time things change. For example, in the Ramayana we see how some of the earlier variants of the Ramayana talk of how when Sita is abducted by Ravana, she takes off her upper garment, so which basically means she's naked chest up, right? She's completely naked at the chest and she throws her garments down, and yet that is not considered to be sinful or disgusting or the sign of a bad or characterless woman. That was just something that was accepted at the time, and at that time there was no such concepts such as blouse that people wear with saris and other dresses today. The concept of blouse only came into existence after the British came into India. So you see how at that time when that was acceptable, but then over time the narrative changed from her removing her entire clothes, upper garment, to her just removing her jewelry and throwing it on the floor, right, when she's abducted. So you see this shift happening because society started deeming that, no, you know what, this is the sign of a characterless woman, and so Sita would not do something like this, so we need to change the narrative. So similarly in the Mahabharata as well, you see a lot of things that are shifting in the pages as you read them. These are not very obvious shifts sometimes they're very subtle, and sometimes they're very obvious. But you can, if you pay attention and you read very closely, you read very slowly through these, through page by page, you will see that certain sections just seem very different. They don't fit well with each other. They don't sound like they were written by the same person or written in the same period of time. They don't sound like they belong to the same thought process. So you can experience these shifts happening, and I think that's one of the strengths of the critical edition of the Mahabharata, because it allows you to see how this epic evolved over time. So, and another thing that I found really interesting is that at the end of this, or I think in the last two parvas of the volume 1, we see Krishna being introduced. Until then, the character of Krishna is nowhere to be found. And when Krishna is introduced as well, you see this sudden devotional element, sort of very supercharged devotional element that comes into play. My theory is that these sections, these parvas, were heavily edited by later writers. And when I say later writers, I mean writers who probably came during the Bhakti period, or writers who came into existence and who started working when Krishna as a deity was being brought up and pushed up as the primary deity in certain parts of India. Because obviously when you read this book, you see that there are shifts in terms of the Hindu pantheon. The gods who are worshipped, you can see a stark difference between which gods were considered to be more prominent at one point of time and which gods were considered to be prominent at another point of time. So when you see Krishna's arrival in this last two parvas, which happens during, I think, the Vidura Gamana Parva and the Rajyalabha Parva, we see this heavily devotional element in the epic, which is frankly unnecessary at this point, because we aren't even introduced to Krishna at this point. If you have read Hindu mythology, or if you are a Hindu, or you are aware of Indian mythology, Indian deity structure, the pantheon structure, then you will know who Krishna is. If you are part of organizations like ISKCON or Hare Krishna, you might be aware of who Krishna is. But then when you're reading this epic as a standalone, when you're reading volume 1 as a standalone, you don't really see why there is suddenly so much importance given to Krishna, especially when he doesn't even arrive in any of the starting parvas. He comes only in the very final section, and there is just too much devotion. You get my drift. It is not warranted if you are writing you're writing the story in one go. And to me, my theory is that these sections were heavily edited in order to bring in the prominence of Krishna and to set him up for his role in the Bhagavad Gita, which is his role in providing this philosophical understanding of human relationships, of human actions, of our roles in society and our roles in our lives. So I think they were trying to set him up for that, and therefore you see this sudden arrival and devotional bhakti aspect of Krishna coming in over here. So that was quite interesting as a shift to read as well. A couple of other things that I noticed was how a lot of the female characters in this volume 1, they were feminists or proto-feminists for their time. I have done a video of Devayani, where my video is titled Devayani and the Art of Consent in Ancient India, where I discuss in immense detail, it's almost an hour-long video, about why Devayani should be considered as a feminist and why Devayani should be lauded by women today. Devayani was a feminist. She took certain decisions that were ahead of her time. She took decisions that were in for her benefit, and which positioned her, of course, as a bad wife and as a bad woman, because she dared to defy the rules of that age. Yet she did things that were for her benefit. She put herself first instead of putting her husband first. We also have the story of Satyavati, where Satyavati herself doesn't showcase many feminist traits, but her father showcases what I call feminist allyship. His father is genuinely concerned for the fate of his daughter, and he puts his foot down when King Shantanu says, he makes all these really, heartfelt declarations of love for Satyavati. And Satyavati's father is very, very particular about how he wants to ensure that his daughter gets the marital rights deserved, that is reserved for the first queen. That is, her children will become heirs to the throne. Her role as the queen mother would be solidified, that she would get respect from Devavrat, that is Bhishma, and that she would be accepted by the kingdom. And he's genuinely very concerned about his daughter's future and life and performance in the court. So you see feminist allyship here as well. So you see a lot of these positive traits, along with the, of course, existing many sexist stereotypes and sexist cultural expectations that are present not just in the Mahabharata, but as a result of these epics in Indian society as well. So volume 1 was very eye-opening, because it made me feel very conflicting emotions, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons why the Mahabharata is so celebrated and much loved, because there is no one morality. Every single character in the Mahabharata dances to the tune of their own dharma. And again, what is dharma? As you read in volume 1, you are so conflicted by what dharma is. What is dharma for one person can be adharma for another. Dharma changes when secrets are revealed, when misinterpretations are cleared, when misunderstandings are straightened out. So dharma changes with every new bit of information that keeps getting added to the mix. So you see these dharma related discourses, these morality conundrums playing up right at the start, when we haven't even gotten to the meat of the Mahabharata, because the morality of a lot of actions that take place, the crux of the Mahabharata lies in, it actually escalates once the Pandavas are exiled and the war begins. That's when the heavy hitters of these questions related to dharma and morality come in. But you see morality of day-to-day life in volume 1. We see the dharma related, morality related questions surrounding women's existence, surrounding the existence of castes that are considered lower. We look at how society treats populations which fall within the Vedic structure of civilization, and those who fall outside the Vedic structure of civilizations, those who they consider to be demons or something, just evil because they don't follow these Vedic rules and rituals. So we see all these underlying archetypes, underlying beliefs and perceptions playing up right here in the first volume. Another thing that really struck me was the character of Yudhishthira. Now, his is a character I'm definitely going to be one day doing a very, very deep dive video about. Yudhishthira's character in popular interpretations, be it Rajgopalachari's Mahabharata or the Palace of Illusions, like I said. You see how he's always shown as this person who is always righteous, and when they say righteous, it doesn't really mean someone who is smart, in the sense that he can discern what's right and wrong. They display Yudhishthira as someone who is just so rigid in his beliefs that he does foolish things without even thinking things through, just so that he can live up to his promise of being righteous. Which something is, which does such a great disservice to his character, because right here in this volume 1, his character really shocked me. He is a very, very shrewd man. He is very shrewd. He's very smart. He's able to really analyze the risk versus reward of any situation. He is able to know the consequences of what might happen if I follow this of a particular path versus some other path. And his understanding of dharma is not unidimensional as we see in the various interpretations of the story. His understanding of dharma, it depends on, first of, who is involved in whatever situation is happening. Secondly, who benefits or loses from the decision that is being taken. And third, what is his role in either helping or condemning someone when something happens. And ultimately, he considers, is my decision going to be beneficial to myself and my family? Because his ultimate dharma is to reclaim his birthright, which is kingship. And so there you see this kind of really complicated thought process starting. You see a complicated morality forming. Now, if your main dharma is to reclaim your birthright and you're willing to do anything to get there, what kind of a dharma is that? Yet every decision you take to get to your primary goal, he keeps analyzing it in the sense of, okay, what is the right thing to do in this situation? It may not essentially be the right thing according to us readers, but to him, what is the right thing in this situation, considering the end goal? And so, his character is just so nuanced and very well developed and just so confusing, especially, after the tiring tropes of Yudhishthira that are there in almost all interpretations of the Mahabharata. And frankly, I'm very happy that I'm getting to see this new side of Yudhishthira. And I'm so eager to read the other volumes to see how his role progresses, because he has some of the most philosophical discussions with Bhishma and other important characters in this epic. So I'm very eager to see how that develops as well. I have made notes upon notes in this book. Like, for example, over here I've just written pretty much everywhere. Some of these notes are my personal analysis of things I've read in the book. Some of them are my connecting the story to modern times as to how we see this reflected in the modern times. For example, in the section where Draupadi gets married, this is after her Swayamvara, when the marriage is actually taking place. There is that particular chapter is just really replete with a lot of debates and discussions that we can have about what exactly is morality, what exactly is the right thing to do, and is it morality if it only serves the cause of men? And what about women? What about the other half of the population? A lot of things come into play about the expectation of a woman being a virgin, the pressure of having to please men, uh, both through their day-to-day behaviors and demeanors, but also in bed. We confront the reality of dowry. And personally, for me, that chapter brought up a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts, and I wrote them down in my trusty book. So this is another book that I've just kept, where I write my more detailed notes and questions that I have about the volumes that I'm reading. Oops, my pencil fell down. So I write a lot more about what I'm thinking, and if in case there's no space to write it over here, or it's something that needs deeper research, I write it in that book. So yeah, volume 1 was quite a ride, and I think if you enjoy the Mahabharata, and if you've read plenty of interpretations and you feel like it's time to dive into something meatier and much more nuanced and much more closer to the ancient texts, then this entire series is something that you need to pick up. Now, this translation is by Bibek Debroy, Dr. Bibek Debroy. There are 2 other translations available, and like I mentioned, I have provided links to these translations in my first video of this playlist where I introduced the readathon. I will link that video down below in the description box, and I will put this playlist in the end card, so be sure to check it out. And I will be starting volume 2 from tomorrow, and I have decided to read these volumes a lot faster. I was very slow with the volume 1 because I wanted to do right by it, and I want to go very deep into it, and I have realized that you can read fast and also read the text deeply and understand it at a more nuanced and deeper level without slowing down to a crawl. So I will definitely be reading it a tad faster than I finished this book, because I took a year to finish volume 1, and I don't want to spend another 9 years reading the other 9 volumes. I want to finish this series in the next 3 years or 4 years max, and then we will start the Harivamsha, followed by the Puranas. I have got access to 3 of the Puranas, I think, or 4 of the Puranas, if I'm remembering it correctly. And Dr. Bibek Debroy is, as usual, translating at the speed of light, and I'm sure he will have the other Puranas ready by the time I finish the Mahabharata. And then we'll move on to the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Arthashastra, the Kama Sutra, anything that I have at this point, which is quite a bit. So we have a very long journey ahead of us, and of course, as you know, I discuss my personal opinions and my personal understandings of these texts with you over here. This is a non-judgmental space, so if you do want to participate with me, if you want to read along with me and share your views, do know this is a non-judgmental space. You can share your views freely, and at the same time, do make sure that you are cognizant of the thoughts and feelings of other people who are participating in this readathon as well. So alright, I will be wrapping up on this note. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel and enable the notification button so that you can get notified every time I put up a Mahabharata related video. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video of Tales in Text. Bye.